The dynamics that I'm talking about could be small or short incremental steps that typically are much better over a longer period of time than making big breakthroughs. But they can also be major breakthroughs. For example, when you are trying to introduce an innovation that is going to change the market, then it's not just a corrective action like the autopilot of the plane, of the aeroplane, but it is more like you're changing the industry structure or even changing the competitive structure internally. Now, where do we see this? How does Conflucore or Confluence come into play? Actually, in almost everything that we do that is dynamic. What does that mean? We can look at it from two angles. One is growing sort of smartly, and second is restructuring. While growing smartly, we have five possibilities. One is organic growth. And that is what we mean is that you are growing smartly. Second could be merging, which means trying to integrate complementary assets together in terms of mergers as well as the cultures together. We could also have acquisitions. In acquisition, it's different than culture. In acquisitions, we have to make sure that the culture of the acquiring company and the acquired company resonate. And often that does not happen. And I'm not going to go in the details of why and how, but we know very well that 70 to 80% of acquisitions fail for this reason, and mergers become unmerged. Fourth, alliances. When you are trying to run together as alliance of some sort, think about Boeing and Airbus, who have so many alliances as well as partnerships. They have to be in confluence with one another. And we are not talking just streamlining, and we are not just talking about alignment, which is a mechanical notion. We're talking, as I said earlier, of the formal and the informal behaviors and actions that take place. And finally, of course, also partnership. That is also growth. You want to grow, and you want to have a partner that is going to deliver you upstream or downstream of your organization or your team certain answers. When it comes to restructuring, an organization may or may not be growing, but it can become a sort of a growth and change thing. And this is where we need to talk about development. Growth is simply becoming bigger, 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 fatter, fatter, fatter. Change is becoming from, let us say, a child to puberty to an adult. But the development is an integrated concept of both. I believe, and we strongly believe in Conflucore, that you cannot do one without the other, and they should not be separated. You just can't change without growing, and no growth is worthwhile unless you have changed. So there's a lot of imperatives on the executives as to how to really develop their organization, not one at the expense of the other, but in confluence together. So let me just repeat. So in growth, as well as in restructuring, and growths are of those five types, and restructuring could be at the culture level, at the administrative reshuffling level. I'm reminded of a time when I used to be in Shell, and Shell's main emphasis was that they would rotate their people. When I was doing very well in operations and they moved me to IT, I was complaining because I thought I'm making a good name in operations. And the chief executive met me and said, if you want to scuttle your growth in this organization, stay where you are, and then you will retire that way. But if you want to learn more about the organization and take more charge and lead it and move up, then you have to essentially rotate, because we want you to understand the entire company, not just any one particular unit or faction of it. It was a very powerful lesson that I got in the 80s, and it has stood with me for a long time. We believe that in the 21st century, organizations will have to consider all their entities, all their behaviors, not just the assets, but also all their realities together. And that is what's going to make them move forward faster and better, and not, fall down while trying to do so. Practically, growth, restructuring, partnering, all these things practically today do not necessarily happen sadly so, it's sad but true, in a Confluent way, and thus Conflucore. What we see happening is that a major initiative is taken and driven through in a way as if that initiative is all that matters. And typically it comes out of any one of the organizational functions. It comes from marketing, or it comes from accounting, or it comes from operations, like for example supply chain or big data out of IT, and then everything else starts sort of gluing around that. In reality, the ripple effects of that are everywhere, and so you have to start as a whole and end as a bigger whole, a better whole, rather than any part of it. Now, there are some futuristic organizations who are doing this, so it is not a concept that is purely theoretical or nebulous. Alphabet, which is the parent company of Google, can be easily spotted doing that. Apple is another example of that. In Korea, in South Korea, LG is an example of that. In China, Haier, which is their equivalent of GE and different than GE, is doing that. And of course, in Emirates, we have the Emirates Airlines, which is doing this. So these are few examples of the emerging Confluent organizations who are Confluent at their core, who respect Confluence as a discipline and as a way of managing. And therefore, their people know that any one action is going to be impacting others, and we must all understand what it means for the larger whole.